In this clip, we're going to examine when and why religion is a cause of peace. So there's a broad range of religion, and so talking about um, the whole variety of different ways that people look at towards the divine um, and come to know their gods or their God, and how they practice and how these faiths collide. There are a few things that I think are fairly universal, and one of them is that religion, all religions, all religions have the capacity to deliver, produce, and promote peace, and they do. Um, all religion has this potential. As we examined in a prior clip, um, there are specific features of religion that makes religious conflict different, and different ways that religion becomes a source of conflict. In this clip, I'd really like to focus on the numerous positives. And part of this is the engagement with the ongoing kind of strategic development that is being offered um, in the text that we've assigned for the class, but also in thinking about conflict and peace as strategic calculations. So, in understanding religion as a source of peace, I'd like to indicate that the first thing that I want to do is separate this into different levels of analysis. We can look at peace at the individual level, at the community level, at the state level, and at the global level. And by the time we've examined all of those four different levels, we'll have quite a robust answer. Um, and so just saying something about this concept of level of analysis. Level of analysis is the way that we can give a clear picture while being incomplete that addresses something fairly specific. If we were, for example, to think about something like climate change, we're talking about something that's global, but we're only ever going to be able to experience it in localities. So talking about climate change would kind of necessitate that we look at what's happening outside of our front doors, but the front doors of others, and looking at this systematically and then look at it over time and make these comparisons. Um, but part of the reason that the level of analysis is important and helpful is because if we look at a global problem as being only global, it makes it hard for people to imagine ways to impact or experience or make a difference at a level where they could make any difference. So level of analysis with religion is, right, there are individual worshipers, and then we get bigger and we go from there. So part of what happens with individuals in our individual level of analysis is that we're seeing two different things that are happening. We're seeing inside the individuals and we're seeing outside the individuals. One of the ways that religion can give and offer peace is actually by helping to quiet the chaos that happens inside of an individual, right? Humans are complex social creatures. We have a variety of wants and needs. We have challenges with being able to address and meet those needs. At the lower level, like with Maslow's hierarchy, we have like our survival needs. But at the top here, at the top of the pyramid, we have the parts of the human that would relate to autonomy and meaning and so forth, right? So we're not just food-seeking creatures. We do need food to survive, but we are also meaning-seeking creatures. And so religion is fantastic at being able to offer people meaning in their lives, right? So that's the part in the heart. That's the part in the mind. That's the part in the soul. And so the people who believe in the soul have different reasons for doing that, and those who don't believe in the soul have their own different reasons for doing that. But again, meaning. So if people find meaning in their lives through their faith, um, that's a tremendous source of peace, right? To feel good in the world, right? There's all sorts of struggle, right? We see struggle everywhere, right? Moving away from, say, Christianity to Buddhism, right? So suffering is everywhere is one of the Four Noble Truths, right? The Four Noble Truths. There's suffering in the world. The cause of suffering is the ego and personal attachment. There can be an end to suffering, and the end to suffering is through the Eightfold Path, right? But the suffering is everywhere, is something that we see explicitly stated by and described by the Buddha, but we see it as a theme for Judaism and Christianity and Islam and Confucianism and Zoroastrianism, right? We have the elements that faith is something that we hang on to, or that the follower would hang on to in light of and despite the struggle and the suffering, right? In fact, the faith might provide meaning and explanation and ways to think about it, right? I left Hinduism off from what I was describing just a moment ago. But the karmic tradition, right, helps people to make sense of the suffering that they're experiencing in combination with a belief in reincarnation. Right? The cycle of samsara would mean that one's karma in this life might be a result of past karma from prior lives, so that people are able to make sense of their meaning and suffering as being part of a bigger picture, and it presumably, right, helps to set people at ease. That's not always the case. Many people have outlined their struggles with faith. Problem of evil is not just a philosophical invention, but it's a philosophical explanation for the struggle people have when they fail to see their God as being just in light of what they experience in life as being evil. How could a loving God allow these things to happen, right? People do lose their faith when they see things that just don't fit within that worldview anymore. But on the whole, people find peace within themselves. They're given a moral code. They're given moral commands. They know what to do. They get to see the good in the world, and they get to have some instruction on how to do that. Children are raised in churches sometimes. These moral codes that they learn at a young age are things that they end up practicing later in life. I certainly have shared at length about how the teachings that I received as a child on forgiveness and compassion and empathy and charity have related to the whole of my adult life's work, right? My dissertation was on forgiveness because of just how important and fundamental I saw that. And working in Sri Lanka and so forth, right? Those things come directly out of that. I'm a meaning-seeking creature. I find meaning through what I do for others. And it's the same as my motivation for teaching, right? And that, for me, all comes from religion. And I'm not allowed to teach you to be religious, but I can talk about religion, right? And I certainly don't want anyone to feel like I've been overwhelmingly Christian or something and trying to demand that others act as I do. In fact, I would say in many cases, don't do what I've done. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I try to be honest about that. Anyway, I can reconcile my past by finding meaning through it and through different religious practices, right? Forgiveness in different traditions works out differently. I happen to like the explanation in Judaism of metanoia, where one makes a turning away from evil. And once you have turned away from the evil, then it would justify the conditions for being forgiven, right? In some ways, you're not the same person who did that anymore. But I see that expressed, again, through karmic traditions, where we're connected by our karma, but there's nothing about this older body that's really even the same at all, right? All of the cells that would have existed in the teenager who made mistakes have been replaced, right? There is nothing about me that is literally the same body, but I am still the same person. And we get an explanation for how that plays out. Anyway, so internal peace. But I also get external peace, right? Individuals knowing how to act, that helps us to explain our actions in relationships with others. And it helps us to understand the rules and expectations with others. We get meaning, but we also get that codified. how to act, when to act certain ways, and what the expectations would be. Certainly not everything is described that way. Just like we have laws about everything, religions tend to have answers for just about every question, but that doesn't mean all individuals know what all of those rules and expectations are at any given time. But it sure does make things easier, right? Sometimes we want to have freedom to be able to think about what we want to do, but other times we just want the convenience of being told what to do. It's easier. It's easier if something's put in place that lets you know how to act, right? You don't have to stress about, like, what's the right choice here. If you have the rule and you follow the rule, sometimes that's just the lazy person's way through life. And there's a piece in that too, right? Rules about everything. We have rules about everything. And sometimes it's frustrating because the rules get in the way of the things that we want to do, right? Rules challenge free will. But other times it makes it easy, right? Because you don't have to question what's the right choice or what should you do in any given situation because you've already been offered and given those directions. So religion offers a rule book that helps us to explain conditions for the self and also for how we can relate to others. So as we expand from the individual to maybe a community level, religion can help provide peace in a number of ways. And one of the ways is that it offers some of the rules and the morality. So we know what to do in order to do right, but we also have good established ways of responding to when people do wrong. And it can take it out of the individual's hands and leave it to the community. Now, in the US, we're a little bit more individualistic, and people still maybe have a tendency towards being more directly and personally involved. But in a number of religious communities where I have interacted, I've seen how, religious officials are able to dictate and direct people onto what their behavior should be. And frequently they're able to do that with the capacity of, this is what's best for the community. We need you to, in the case of the Rwandan genocide or responding to the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone, different religious leaders as well as different chiefs, and sometimes the chiefs acting from religious authority and sometimes not, have been able to tell people, you need to forgive this person in order for the community to heal. And in more collectivist communities, that's actually something that has a whole lot of force. And community healing takes place when individuals agree that we need to stick together in order for our survival. And that is not necessarily an easy thing to do. Some of the struggles and some of the challenges that have been faced in these communities can be quite intense and profound. As we move from like the community level to the state level, and when we think about states, sometimes I'm actually referring to like Ohio versus California or something, but the state usually is a reference to a national government. But so at the state level, what do we do, right? What do we do in America? We've got Republicans and we have Democrats and we have elections, and one party wins and the other party loses. But we're also a country where a lot of people have profound declarations of religious faith. And so you have a faith and it tells you to love your neighbor. And you should love your neighbor despite whether or not the person voted for the person that you supported or not. Right? I mean, politics can be very divisive. Religion can be very divisive. Don't get me wrong, right? We have these kind of societal rules and certain contexts where we would say, like, there's 3 things that you don't talk about. And religion is almost always on the list of things not to talk about, because talking about it means debating about it, and debating about it means that everybody just ends up angry because nobody changes their mind. Well, religion also offers you ways to avoid and to be able to deal and to be able to heal. And healing is great for communities. It's also great for countries. It tells us about doing things like loving your neighbor and being charitable to those in need. Um, and when we practice those things, we make ourselves feel better because we have followed through on our own personal meaning, right? When you do good for somebody else, it will frequently make you feel better because you're happy about what you've done. So you feel better, and the person you've helped feels better. Um, there are maybe some limits to that, and I don't want to say that there is or isn't altruism. But again, at the state level, we can see things like national identity, um, and some of that might be like, is this a Christian nation, right? And what does it mean to be a Christian nation? And when people act according to the fundamental teachings of Christ, um, that would mean doing things like having empathy, sympathy, compassion, charity, for being forgiving. And those are ways that we can approach peace, right? Being vengeful is a way to see pretty clear escalation and conflict. Somebody hurts you, so you get them back. If somebody hurts you and you forgive them, might be hard to do, but if that actually takes place, once the forgiveness happens, that you have a pretty good interruption, right? That can be a pretty successful intervention into what could otherwise be a pretty destructive cycle and conflict. And then we have the we have the intrastate, right? That's what's happening. The people within, right? When we need to heal as Americans, when we need to heal as a country, but when Americans and Canadians, or North Americans versus Europeans, or whatever it might be, right? When we have these conflicts that take place, right? It can happen. It can happen at, again, the individual level of analysis is after World War II. It took a long time before Americans forgave Japan for attacking Pearl Harbor, and it took a long time before there was healing between the U.S. and Germany after World War II. In fact, there's a book, an Ethic for Enemies, by Donald Shriver Jr., where he argues that the U.S. actually was able to forgive Germany faster than they were able to forgive Japan. And he outlines a number of reasons why he thinks that took place. But again, if we look at our current events, where we're seeing, the president of the United States of America calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus, or the Chinese coronavirus, and we're seeing increases in hate crimes against Asian people and Asian Americans with association to that. There's a certain kind of damage that happens that way. When we look at an individual level, we can figure out, all right, which are the people who have actually experienced the hate crimes, and which are the people who have actually perpetrated the hate crimes, versus the people who have perpetrated crimes that were physical assaults, but they weren't racially or hate based, right? It is always possible that a person's attacking someone for different reasons. Although it's very unfortunate that we're seeing spikes in these kinds of crimes, because the people who are here, there's no way, there's literally no way that those people are connected to the outbreak to begin with. But, right, guilt by association, that's what happens when we see people as being individuals that are a part of a community, right? We're connecting things differently. So religion can tell you, right? What's the Christian thing to do? If I want to practice that, I should be identifying those people who I know and those who I don't know, who may be suffering even more right now, and let them know that I love them and I care about them, and I'm here to support them, especially in their time of need. I can also reach out to the people who might be the haters and say, look, I know you're suffering and struggling and want to talk about it. Maybe I can counsel people through. Maybe I could counsel Christians who are susceptible to some of the frustrations and some of the blame, and help them see some of the same principles the same way that I do, so that instead of acting in violent ways, that they would feel understood and see other ways to engage with this stimulation of emotion without responding violently. And I think that, again, religion can be a great way to do that, but it would be a whole lot better if the religious leaders were the ones coming out, right? The people with even more authority were coming out, and the presidents coming out, right? Although I don't want to assume what Trump might say about religion or not. Um, but when the leadership comes out, they can inspire it, right? Bishop Desmond Tutu, he was instrumental in seeing Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa, right? And he did that on the basis of religious authority, and people listened to him on that basis. So, as much as it can be the source of conflict, right, that people have disagreements in their worldviews, it can also be the source of peace when people are being reminded about faiths that tell them to act in ways that treat others with love and care, despite how they're feeling of anger or being vengeful. So, hope you enjoy this one. Catch you on the next one. Hopefully, it'll be a bit shorter.